Hey guys, this is Noxcealence, and today I want to talk about legacy characters. More specifically, I want to talk about how I believe one certain legacy character is conceptually more appealing compared to another legacy character. The characters in question being Steel from DC and Miles Morales from Marvel. Before I start, I want to explain what a legacy character is for those of you who don't know. Now, some of you may assume that a legacy character is a character that is well known and has left a strong impact on the story that they came from. I myself originally thought that was the meaning of that phrase too, but strangely enough, it's not. You see, legacy characters are characters that inherit the role and or ideals of a character that came before them. For example, Wally West inherited the role of the Flash from Barry Allen after Barry died. Or after he decided to retire. It honestly depends on what comic run you're reading. Since he inherited the role of the Flash from Barry, that means that Wally is a legacy character. Now you're all probably wondering who I believe between Miles and Steel is a more conceptually appealing legacy character. And I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off real quick by saying that it's Steel.
Move this man!
You know, after the last video I did on Miles Morales, I was kind of expecting a response. Originally for this video, I was going to be comparing Miguel O'Hara to Miles Morales, but after recently finding out about Steel, I thought it'd be better to replace Miguel with him. The reason for this being that Steel and Miles Morales actually have a lot in common. They're both African American legacy characters, they're both incredibly intelligent characters, both of them are succeeding characters who died in action, both of the characters they succeeded came back to life, and both of them uphold the values of the characters they're succeeding. However, as I said earlier, I believe that conceptually, Steel is a more interesting legacy character than Miles Morales. The reason I believe that despite their similarities is because unlike Miles, who is too similar to Spider-Man, the character he's succeeding, Steel feels more like his own person despite succeeding and wearing the symbol of Superman. The way I'm going to go about this is that I'm going to go over their origins and how their characters are presented at that point, and analyze what Miles does wrong compared to Steel and what Steel does right. And I just want to remind everyone I'm only going over why I think Steel is more appealing than Miles in regards to their conception, not their overall character development. It wouldn't be fair to say one is definitively better than the other when I haven't read all of Steel's comic run, and since it's been a while since I've read Miles' Ultimate Comics run. And since reading those runs to their entirety would take too much time, I'm just gonna go over how they were both created and how their characters were established initially. The reason I'm clarifying this is because I don't want anyone claiming that I'm being unfair or biased. Now with that out of the way, let's begin.
Everyone keeps telling me how my story is supposed to go. Nah, I'ma do my own thing.
Back in the 2000s, Marvel Comics had created an entirely separate Marvel comic universe that was known as the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate Universe was essentially a reboot of the canon Marvel Comics universe that retold and reimagined the stories of many Marvel superheroes, including Spider-Man's. In 2011, the Ultimate Universe had a story arc for Spider-Man known as The Death of Spider-Man, where Spider-Man dies after fighting his nemesis the Green Goblin right after fighting off 4 other villains. In order to fill in the gap that Peter left, Marvel had created a new character that would go on to be the Ultimate Universe's newest Spider-Man. And as you all know, that character is Miles Morales. Before the events of the Death of Spider-Man arc, Miles was just a normal kid who happened to be pretty intelligent. He had just gotten accepted into a prestigious school called Brooklyn Visions Academy through a lottery due to there being hundreds of applicants and only 40 spots open. After getting accepted, Miles went to visit his uncle Aaron to tell him the good news. To celebrate the occasion, Aaron went to get some popsicles, leaving Miles alone in his living room. Suddenly, a spider that had crawled into Aaron's duffel bag while he was doing a heist crawls out and bites Miles, causing him to fall unconscious. When Miles wakes up, he's quickly met with the sight of his father, who had been informed by Aaron about what had happened. An argument breaks out between Aaron and Miles' dad, Jefferson, causing Miles to run away. While Jefferson tries to go after him, Miles discovers that he has the power to turn invisible when his dad walks right past him but he doesn't see him. Little by little, Miles learns that he has more superhuman abilities, such as enhanced strength and speed as well as bioelectrokinesis. After going to his friend Genki to tell him about his powers and what had happened prior to getting them, Genki later figures out that Miles was bitten by a radioactive spider just like Peter. Although he was not thrilled with having powers due to wanting to live a normal life and not wanting to get locked away for having them, Miles does attempt to use his powers to do good. However, he ends up feeling overwhelmed and anxious from putting his life at risk, leading him to regret his actions and vow to never try to be a hero again. One day, during the middle of the night, all of the students of Brooklyn Visions are brought to the gym for a safety drill due to a superpowered scuffle going on around New York. Once it's revealed that Spider-Man was involved and that he had gotten shot, Miles decides to take action and attempt to help Spider-Man. Thanks to the explosions going off around the battle area, Miles is able to pinpoint Spider-Man's location. However, he comes too late. Once Miles arrives, Peter already won the battle before losing his life a few seconds after. After witnessing Peter's death, Miles regrets having decided to swear off being a hero, believing that if he had just gone through with it, he could have been able to save Peter. Deciding to show up to Peter's memorial service, Miles spots one of Peter's closest friends and ex-girlfriend Gwen Stacy, who he had met right after Peter had died. Miles asks her why Peter decided to become Spider-Man, to which she explains it was because Peter's Uncle Ben had died when he could have saved him. His inability to act caused Peter to live by a philosophy his uncle believed, that with great power comes great responsibility. Wanting to follow in Peter's footsteps, Miles decides to become Spider-Man, and even tries to design his own Spidey suit. But before he could even try making a costume for himself, Genki hands him a Spider-Man Halloween costume to use to honor Peter. Taking the suit out for a spin, Miles comes across one of Peter's villains, Kangaroo, and manages to beat him, albeit in a clumsy manner. One night while on patrol, Miles comes across Spider-Woman, a female genetic clone of Peter Parker, who's not too happy with Miles' choice in clothes. Webbing him up in order to question him, Spider-Woman takes Miles to the Triskelion, headquarters to that universe's version of the Avengers, after Miles knocks himself out trying to escape. Standing in front of Miles once he woke up was Spider-Woman, Iron Man, Hawkeye, and the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury. Before Spider-Woman or the two Avengers could question the superpowered teenager, Fury forced him to leave in order to have a one-on-one conversation with Miles. Revealing that he knew how Miles got his powers, Fury asks him why he decided to become a hero, to which Miles replies that he wanted to take Peter's place because he believes that with great power comes great responsibility. Before they could continue their conversation, one of Peter's villains, Electro, wakes up in the Triskelion's medical wing and starts wreaking havoc. Deciding it was best to help, Miles gets the drop on Electro using his camouflage powers. Then, using his bioelectricity, Miles stuns Electro, allowing Fury to knock him out by shooting him. Once Miles returns to school, he is met by Jessica Drew, the true identity of Spider-Woman. She gifts Miles a suitcase claiming that it's from Fury before walking away. Once Miles opens it up, it's revealed to be a new costume, similar to the design he had tried sketching on his own time. Donning the suit, Miles officially becomes New York's newest Spider-Man. Now I just want to explain that there's nothing inherently wrong with Miles' origin story. It does a good job of establishing Miles as a character and how and why he decided to take up the mantle of Spider-Man. It's an all-around well-written origin story. The issue lies within the fact that Miles' co-creator Brian Michael Bendis didn't really write Miles in a way that made him stand out. His costume is just a red and black version of Peter's costume, he's incredibly intelligent like Peter, and his inability to act led to someone's death, like Peter. And sure, his bioelectricity and camouflage powers are cool, but Peter was able to camouflage himself in both Spider-Man Unlimited and the comics, and Jessica Drew had bioelectricity first in the canon Marvel comic universe. That's not to say that him and Peter are one-to-one the same character. There's obviously differences between the two, but there are more similarities than there are differences between them. There's only one similarity between them that I have no criticisms about, that they both believe that with great power comes great responsibility, because that's the core of who Spider-Man is as a character, so having Peter's successor believe in that philosophy is essential. Honestly, the reason why I think they made Miles so similar to Peter was because Marvel wanted to create a diverse Spider-Man but didn't want to put in the work to actually make him unique. You see, the reason that Miles was created was because Marvel wanted to make a new, diverse Spider-Man way back in 2008 due to America being on the cusp of having its first African-American president, Barack Obama. However, at the time, they didn't come up with anything past a new Spider-Man having to be an African-American character, so the concept was shelved until years later, when they decided to kill Ultimate Peter. Ultimate Peter's death allowed Marvel the chance to insert a diverse Spider-Man into the comics, which turned out to be Miles Morales. So it wouldn't really shock me if I found out that Miles being black and his appearance out of costume was given more thought than his characteristics, powers, and his costume. But that's more of a theory than it is an accusation. Now you're probably wondering, Noct, what do you think would have needed to be added or changed to Miles for him to be a conceptually more interesting legacy character to you? And my answer is pretty simple. His character should have been made to be more like Steel. What do I mean by that, you're wondering? Well, let me show you. In 1992, DC Comics released a comic issue that marked the end of one of their most beloved and well-known characters, Superman. The comic was titled The Death of Superman, and it marked the conclusion of an ongoing fight between Superman and a villain known as Doomsday that spanned across several comic issues. The issue had ended with Superman beating Doomsday at the cost of his own life. After his death, 4 people had come out of nowhere in order to take Superman's place, and although they all wore his symbol, there was only one character who understood and tried to live up to his ideals, and that character was John Henry Irons, better known known as Steel. John was originally a weapons engineer for a weapon manufacturing company known as Amertech Industries. However, after finding out that his weapons had been stolen and sold to criminals to use on innocent people, a grief-stricken John faked his death and became a construction worker, changing his name to Henry Johnson. One day while working a construction job, one of his co-workers named P accidentally tripped and fell off a steel beam. John quickly sprang into action and rescued P. However, the cable he had swung on to save him came loose, causing the future hero to fall. Luckily for him, Superman had saved him in the nick of time, causing John to feel indebted to him. However, the only thing that Superman had wanted in return was for John to live a life that was worth saving. When John had heard about the fight going on between Superman and Doomsday, he had wanted to help Superman, but he was unable to physically keep up. Wanting to pay back Superman for what he had done for him and to stop the distribution of the weapons he created, John created a set of armor and became a superhero, adopting the moniker Man of Steel from Superman before later shortening it to Steel. Now, the thing that Steel does right that Miles does wrong is that while some aspects of his character do come from Superman, Steel doesn't have all that much in common with his predecessor, allowing him to stand out more. While Superman's alter ego Clark Kent is a photographer, John was a weapons engineer and later a construction worker. While Superman has powers, Steel relies on his armor, physical strength, and his hammer in order to fight villains. And while Superman is the world's symbol of hope, Steel is a hero only to Metropolis. Well, until his own comic run, but that's besides the point. The differences between them truly help emphasize the things that they share in common. They both fight for truth and justice, and they're both symbols of strength and resilience. The reason I say this is because even though Superman is without a doubt stronger than Steel, they both have a shared desire to do what is right and make sure that justice is served. So even when they both struggle and fall, as long as they both wear their S symbols on their chest, they will always get back up and keep fighting, because they want justice to prevail, no matter what. Another thing that helps Steel stand out is that he is heavily inspired both in and out of universe by John Henry, an American folk hero that is also a symbol of strength and resilience. In folklore, John Henry was a freed slave who worked as a steel driver, which is someone who hammers spikes into railroad ties. One day, the company that he was working for bought a steam-powered drill to speed up the progress of the railroad. However, this would be at the cost of John Henry and his fellow steel drivers' jobs. Determined to keep his job, John Henry proposed a race against the drill to prove that he could do the job better than the machine. As he raced against the steam-powered drill, he became more and more exhausted as the race went on. However, in spite of his exhaustion, John Henry kept pushing himself harder and harder until eventually he was able to beat the drill. Unfortunately, John Henry had tired himself so much that after he had finished the race, he died of exhaustion. Despite his death, John Henry does a good job being a symbol of strength and resilience, because even as he got closer and closer to his limit, he was able to persevere against a machine that was meant to do his job faster than him. And just like John Henry, Steel perseveres even when the odds are against him, fighting back with his hammer in hand with all his might. Honestly, out of all the characters that Superman's successor could have been based on, choosing a character who represents strength and perseverance in the face of low odds was a brilliant choice. It honestly goes to show how much thought and consideration was put into Steel as a character. And that in turn also goes to show how little thought was put into Miles' conception when his differences with Peter are small in comparison to his similarities with him. And I'm not saying they had to completely rework Miles, I'm just saying they could have changed a few things about him so that he could have stood out more when he was first introduced. For example, they could have had him have a more original costume or power set like Spider-Man 2099 does. Additionally, instead of also making him a science whiz like Peter was, they could have just made him an average kid. Heck, if they decided not to do one of those two options, they could have given him his own name like Wolf Spider. I'm suggesting these things not because I dislike Miles, but because conceptually, he's not all that special compared to Peter. Maybe if I were to do a deep dive into all his comic appearances, I would be proven wrong, but in terms of his conception and origin, Miles has always felt more like a shadow of Peter's character, which is why to me, Steel will always be a conceptually more appealing legacy character than Miles is. You know, this video was actually a lot of fun to make. Let me know if you guys want me to do a follow-up video in the future where I read both Miles' Ultimate Run and Steel's comic run and decide who's the better character overall. Or maybe I can read Spider-Man 2099's original run and compare his character to Miles during his Ultimate Run. Or maybe you guys can suggest your own ideas. The choice is yours really. And with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video and you want to show support, like, comment, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter and Odyssey. We're over halfway to 10,000 subscribers, so any and all support is greatly appreciated. Have a good night guys, and until next time, lights out.